The Utah sun, that high-to-set bleach of light, was beginning to soften into the long, forgiving shadows of early evening on July 14th. In the parking lot of a Provo strip mall, a scene that had become unsettlingly familiar in America was playing out. A group of protesters, united under the banner "No Kings," had gathered. Their message, a fervent rejection of governmental overreach, was etched on their signs and shouted through their megaphones. The air thrummed with a specific kind of energy, part righteous anger, part street fair camaraderie. There were lawn chairs, coolers of water passed hand to hand, and the low hum of conversation punctuated by amplified speeches. It was a protest. But on its edges, it felt like a community block party. Across the asphalt, separated by a tense sliver of neutral space, was a smaller counter-protest. The two groups lobbed slogans back and forth, a verbal tennis match with no net. The Provo police, and their neon yellow vests, formed a quiet, watchful line, their strategy one of monitored de-escalation. They were a buffer, not an intervention. And then there was Brandon ***. Not a protester. Not a counter-protester. Just a 34-year-old man with a smartphone and a curiosity about the world unfolding in his city. He stood apart, a solitary figure with his arm extended, his screen a tiny and blinking eye recording the scene. He was the modern-day citizen witness, the one who believed the whole story lived in the uninterrupted frame. His focus was absolute, his expression one of detached observation. He was filming the ebb and flow of democracy in real time, a digital archivist of dissent. Moving through the No Kings group was Jesse **33, a volunteer tasked with security. He wasn't a hired guard, he was a committed believer who had taken it upon himself to protect his friends and their cause. He wore the weight of this self-appointed duty visibly, his posture rigid, his eyes scanning not the message of the protest, but for threats against it. In his mind, the line between protector and participant was blurring into a battlefield imperative. He saw not citizens with differing views, but potential infiltrators, aggressors. The tension wasn't in the air he breathed, it was the oxygen. What happened next was not a riot. It wasn't a brawl. It was a sudden, violent punctuation mark in a sentence of shouted arguments. A man from the counter-protest group, his own passions ignited, stepped across the invisible line. He approached the No Kings side, his intent seemingly to engage, to confront. Words were exchanged, faces inches apart. Jesse moved like a bolt. This was the threat he'd been waiting for. A scuffle erupted, a brief, chaotic tangle of limbs. In the blur, the counter-protector was shoved. He stumbled back, and in a fleeting moment of chaotic imbalance, his hand may have brushed near Jesse's waist. And then, the sound. A single, catastrophic bang that tore the fabric of the evening in two. It wasn't a loud crowd noise, it was a sharp, final, metallic crack that silenced every human sound instantly. Daco slapped off the strip mall walls. For a half second, there was perfect, horrifying silence. Then, the scream. Brandon, the filmmaker, the observer, was no longer standing. He lay on the sun-warmed asphalt, a dark, startling stain already spreading across his chest. His phone clattered to the ground beside him, its screen miraculously still glowing, still recording now, capturing only the shocked faces of strangers looking down, and the vast, indifferent blue of the Utah sky. Chaos, now of a different, more primal kind, erupted. The protest's righteous anger vanished, replaced by the human terror of violent death. "Medic!" someone shrieked. The word a desperate prayer. The police line shattered into urgent motion, officers rushing forward, their hands going to their own weapons, trying to locate the source of the shot, trying to process a scene that had just exploded. And in the center of it all, standing frozen, the pistol still in his hand, was Jesse. The protector. The volunteer. The look on his face was one of abject, incomprehensible horror. The counter-protester he'd grappled with was unharmed, standing a few feet away, pale and shaking. The bullet had missed its intended threat entirely. It had arced across that neutral space and found the one person who was not a participant, Brandon. The witness. Paramedics worked with frantic, brutal efficiency, but the wound was a catastrophe. Brandon's eyes, so focused behind his phone's lens just minutes before, were now empty, reflecting only the swirling emergency lights. The life had been snatched from him not because of his beliefs, but because of his presence. He was not a casualty of war, he was a casualty of a fear so profound it had mistaken observation for an existential threat. Jesse was disarmed, tackled, and cuffed. He offered no resistance, his body gone limp with the shock of his own action. As officers led him away, his face was a mask of utter ruin. He had come to guard idea, and in its defense, he had destroyed a life. The aftermath was a different kind of unraveling. The police investigation painted a stark picture. Brandon was over 30 feet away, posing no threat. Jesse's claim of a struggle for his gun was undercut by witnesses and the victim's tragic, impartial footage. The charge was manslaughter, a legal term that felt woefully small to contain the enormity of the loss. For Brandon's family, the world became a prison of grief and unanswerable questions. His mother, in a trembling television interview, held a picture of her smiling son. "He just wanted to see what was happening," she said, her voice breaking. "He always wanted to understand both sides. That's who he was. He wasn't there to fight. He was there to see. The pain in her eyes was a raw, open wound. On true crime and civic watchdog channels, the case exploded. The video fragments were analyzed frame by frame. Protest security or vigilante justice? Thundered one host. The death of the neutral observer. Mourned another. The debates raged. When does self-defense morph into tragic overreach? What is the responsibility of a protest movement to police its own? In an age where everyone films, what is the price of being the one behind the camera? But beyond the analysis, the story that lingered was a human one. It was the story of a man who went out to document a moment in his city's life and never came home. It was the story of another man, so consumed by the narrative of conflict that he created its deadliest possible outcome. And it was the story of a community and a nation left to grapple with the poisonous idea that in the great, shouting arena of American dissent, the simple act of watching has become, for some, a capital offense. The strip mall parking lot is empty now. The signs are gone, the shouts are silent. But if you stand there at dusk, in the same spot where Brandon fell, you can almost feel the ghost of that single, terrible gunshot. A permanent scar on the air, a reminder that when fear is armed, the first casualty is always the truth, and sometimes, its only witness.